Analysts say a direct hit by an extreme coronal mass ejection could be catastrophic, leading to widespread power blackouts.
Have you ever wondered why billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg suddenly started buying islands and building impenetrable bunkers that cost hundreds of millions? It's not just a new trend in extreme home improvement. In fact, there's a looming disaster that could explain their urgent preparations. In 2024, scientists predict an apocalyptic solar storm, an event so powerful it threatens to plunge our technologically dependent world into chaos, potentially sending us back into the Middle Ages. All of our satellites will be destroyed, GPS systems will falter, television broadcasts will go static, and the internet, the backbone of modern society, will cease to exist. But the effects go beyond just communication failures. The electrical grids that power our cities and industries will be next. Transformers, unable to cope with the surge of solar energy, will fail en masse, plunging the entire world into darkness. There won't be any electricity for months, possibly years. Water supply systems that rely on electric pumps will cease to function, and refrigeration systems will fail, halting the preservation of food and medicine. Without any communication, food, or water, there will be massive chaos and anarchy where everyone is fighting for their own survival. You may be thinking that this is just another one of those end-of-the-world predictions that will never actually happen. After all, if such a thing never happened in our history, what is the chance of it happening now? But that's the thing. This event happened before. In fact, it happened not once, but many times, and it undoubtedly will happen again.
Planet Earth dodged a catastrophe 2 years ago. Scientists say an extreme solar storm believed to be the most powerful in at least 150 years barely missed the U.S. As Mark Martin shows us, if it would have hit the Earth, the results could have been devastating.
We didn't pay much attention to it because our civilization wasn't so reliant on technology and electricity back then, and we were barely affected by it as solar storms rarely pose a direct threat to human life. In the middle of the night on September 2, 1859, people across the globe were startled awake by an eerie, otherworldly glow in the sky that turned night into day. The aurora borealis, commonly known as the Northern Lights, stretched as far south as Cuba and Honolulu, while the aurora australis, or Southern Lights, reached up to Santiago, Chile. For countless individuals worldwide, this marked their first encounter with the aurora, leaving them puzzled by the unusually bright skies. In some places, it was so bright that birds began chirping, and the gas and candle street lamps were extinguished, deemed unnecessary by the bewildered lamplighters. Some feared it heralded the apocalypse, whereas others, deceived by the illuminated skies and the sound of birds, mistook it for the sunrise and began their daily routines. The telegraph system, the technological marvel of the age and the backbone of international communication, suddenly and inexplicably went haywire. Operators were shocked, literally, by sparks flying from their equipment. Some even reported that their machines worked better unplugged, powered solely by the electric air around them. The cause of this unprecedented event was entirely unknown to the people of the time, a mysterious phenomenon that would later be known as the Carrington event. It was named after the English astronomer Richard Carrington, who, on September 1st the previous day, amid his routine observations, witnessed the event that would etch his name into the annals of history, the most intense geomagnetic storm ever recorded. Carrington's daily ritual involved painstakingly sketching the sunspots he observed through his telescope, a method that allowed him to track the movement and changes in the sun's magnetic activity. On this particular day, as he peered through his telescope, Carrington noticed a group of enormous sunspots on the sun's surface. These were not uncommon, but what happened next was unlike anything he or anyone else had ever seen. Carrington observed a sudden, intense flash of white light emanating from the sunspots. This brilliant flare of light was so unexpected and extraordinary that Carrington was momentarily stunned. Quickly regaining his composure, he rushed to record the event, noting the time and characteristics of the flare. This meticulous documentation would prove crucial in linking the solar flare to the geomagnetic disturbances that soon followed on Earth. The phenomenon Carrington observed was a solar flare, a powerful burst of radiation emanating from the release of magnetic energy associated with sunspots. At first, Carrington himself did not fully understand the implications of what he had seen. But after witnessing the chaos that happened the next day, he knew there was a connection. His observations provided the first clear evidence that solar flares were connected to geomagnetic storms on Earth. But why would the Carrington even be considered apocalyptic? After all, in the end, it was just some lights in the sky and broken telegraphs. Well, the only reason the Carrington event of 1859 didn't destroy human civilization was the technological landscape of the time. The most advanced technology of the era, the telegraph system, did not have the ubiquity or critical importance that today's power grids and communication networks hold. The telegraph system's disruption did cause confusion and inconvenience, but it was not integral to the functioning of society as a whole. Daily life for the majority of the population, which was still largely agrarian or involved in manual labor, continued without much interruption. People were accustomed to living without the conveniences that electricity and electronic communication provide. Communities were more self-sufficient with local food production and water sources that did not rely on electric power. This meant that while the telegraph lines were down and communication was temporarily stalled, the basic needs of most people remained unaffected. To understand the potential for such an event to disrupt modern civilization, one must delve into the phenomena of solar flares, coronal mass ejections, CMEs, and the Earth's magnetosphere. The corona, the Sun's outer atmosphere, is shaped by intense magnetic fields. Over time, these fields can become entangled, gradually accumulating energy as if coiling a spring. This energy is suddenly unleashed during the realignment of these magnetic fields, resulting in solar flares or ejections. While solar flares and CMEs can occur simultaneously, they are distinct phenomena. Solar flares, essentially bursts of light, are confined to the Sun's lower atmosphere and are relatively minor. In contrast, CMEs are colossal, at times eclipsing the Sun in size, propelling billions of tons of scorching plasma through space at immense speeds. Although CMEs occur across the Sun's surface and often veer off into space without consequence, occasionally they are directed towards Earth. Minor CMEs pass unnoticed, with our atmosphere filtering out cosmic radiation and our magnetic field steering the solar plasma towards the poles, resulting in the natural light display of auroras. However, solar activity, much like Earth's weather, spans a spectrum from mild to severe. While CMEs are a common solar phenomenon, occurring a few times daily, the Sun can produce formidable superstorms once or twice per century that reach Earth. The impact of these superstorms on our planet can vary widely, from minor disruptions to devastating consequences for our technological infrastructure and way of life. Upon arrival, the interaction between a CME and the Earth's magnetosphere is where the science becomes particularly intriguing. The Earth's magnetosphere is a region of space dominated by Earth's magnetic field. It protects the planet from the solar wind, a stream of charged particles emanating from the Sun. However, when a CME reaches the Earth, it can compress the magnetosphere and induce currents in the Earth's ionosphere, the layer of the Earth's atmosphere that is ionized by solar and cosmic radiation. These induced currents can cause fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field, known as geomagnetic storms. The severity of these storms is measured on the G scale, from G1, minor, to G5, extreme. A G5 storm, like the Carrington event, can have profound impacts on electrical systems, satellites, and even radiation exposure for high-altitude flights and space missions. The reason these geomagnetic storms can be so disruptive lies in their ability to induce electric currents in long conductors, such as power lines, pipelines, and undersea cables. These induced currents can overload electrical grids, leading to transformer failures and widespread power outages. Moreover, the increased radiation can damage the electronics and solar panels of satellites, potentially knocking out GPS, telecommunications, and weather forecasting. Understanding the potential impacts of such solar events has become a critical area of research, given our increasing reliance on technology. Yet, despite that, nothing has been done to protect us from such an event. In fact, just a few years ago, Earth narrowly escaped a solar storm of a magnitude like that of the Carrington event of 1859. Do you remember the scary Mayan prophecy, which many believe predicted significant global changes, or even the end of the world in 2012? Well, in 2012, the world very nearly witnessed its end. It was in July when a coronal mass ejection burst from the sun's surface in the direction of Earth's orbital path. This 2012 event, had it struck Earth, could have rivaled or even surpassed the Carrington event in its potential to disrupt modern technological infrastructure, from power grids to satellite communications. Luckily, however, the solar storm missed Earth by a mere 9 days.
Daniel Baker of the University of Colorado told colleagues from NASA, "If it had hit, we would still be picking up the pieces. I have come away from our recent studies more convinced than ever that Earth and its inhabitants were incredibly fortunate that the 2012 eruption happened when it did."
That's right. We were saved not by our astronomical knowledge, science, or technology, but by pure luck. If this event happened 9 days later than it did, who knows if we would even be alive today?
Without the electric grid, well, of course, there's no power. There's also no water. There's also no communications, no transportation, no medical care. The financial system would be down. The environmental effects would be catastrophic at a level that we've never seen before.
Had this solar storm occurred a week earlier, the catastrophe would have been of biblical proportions, and we would still be trying to rebuild the affected system.
A study by the National Academy of Sciences found the total economic impact could be more than $2 trillion. That's 20 times greater than the cost of Hurricane Katrina.
But the cost of rebuilding it is not the real problem. The real concern is that we will need at least 4 years to fully rebuild it. What would happen to our civilization in those 4 years without electricity? Evidence suggests that powerful solar storms have been impacting Earth for millennia. A study published in January 2022 disclosed findings of radioactive particles embedded deep within Greenland's ice, remnants of a massive solar storm that struck our planet approximately 9,200 years ago. Moreover, NASA spaceflight has documented that a solar storm of a magnitude comparable to the Carrington event battered Earth around 774 AD, further exemplifying the historical precedence of significant solar disturbances. Solar storms of the magnitude capable of causing widespread technological disruption are estimated to occur approximately once every 100 to 200 years. However, the frequency of such events and their impacts on Earth can vary widely based on the cyclical nature of solar activity and the complexities of predicting space weather phenomena. Solar storms have periodically reminded humanity of our vulnerability to the whims of the sun. One such event occurred on March 13, 1989, when a powerful geomagnetic storm struck Earth, leading to the collapse of the Hydro-Quebec power grid in Canada. This event resulted in a widespread blackout that affected millions of people for over 9 hours. The storm was triggered by a CME that interacted with the Earth's magnetosphere, inducing currents strong enough to overload power lines and transformers. The 1989 Quebec blackout exemplifies the direct impact solar storms can have on electrical infrastructure. Another notable instance is the series of solar storms known as the Halloween storms in October and November 2003. During this period, the sun unleashed a barrage of solar flares and CMEs which disrupted satellite operations, affecting GPS navigation, communication networks, and even caused the temporary shutdown of the Swedish power grid. In addition to direct impacts on technology, solar storms pose a risk to human health, particularly for airline crews and passengers on polar routes. During the Halloween storms of 2003, airlines were forced to reroute flights to avoid the increased radiation levels. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station had to take shelter to avoid getting radiation sickness. But all of these events were relatively weak compared to the Carrington event. So the question is, what exactly will happen if a Carrington event hits us? Well, if a solar storm of that magnitude strikes, it's like flicking off the world's power switch. In an instant, everything modern civilization relies on starts to crumble. Satellites fry in orbit, cutting off cell phones, internet, and TV. Without GPS, planes lose their way and the once orderly skies descend into chaos. The first hours are marked by confusion. Radios spit static instead of news, leaving people scrambling for information. But as the reality sets in, confusion turns to panic. In cities, the night falls like a curtain, streetlights and homes going dark. Hospitals, stuck on emergency generators, face the grim choice of who to save and who to let go. Water supply systems that rely on electric pumps cease to function. Refrigeration systems fail, halting the preservation of food and medicine. Then the supermarkets become battlegrounds. With cash registers dead and card machines useless, it's not long before panic buying turns to looting. Windows shatter and doors are kicked in as people fight over the last cans of food and bottles of water. The thin veneer of society starts to peel away, revealing a desperation many thought humanity had evolved beyond. Without electricity, the pumps at gas stations are just metal sculptures. Cars become useless hunks of metal blocking the roads. Public transport stops. Cities become traps for the millions who live in them. In the days that follow, without fresh deliveries, food runs out. People start to look at the canned goods in their cupboards, wondering how long they can make them last. Water becomes gold. People collect rainwater or break into buildings in search of anything to drink. With no power for heating, the cold begins to bite. In northern cities, the chill of winter creeps into homes. People huddle for warmth, burning whatever they can find. And everywhere, the darkness of night is complete. No street lamps, no light from windows. There will be no police, no firefighters, and no ambulances. Governments will fall as they won't be able to operate without any communication lines. Local warlords and gangs take control, ruling through fear. There will be no laws as everyone will be desperate to survive. Neighbors turn on neighbors. Strangers are threats, not fellow survivors. In the countryside, farmers guard their crops and livestock, knowing they're targets for the hungry masses fleeing the cities. But with no fuel for tractors, they can only watch as fields go untended. And then there's the famine. Without food shipments and functioning markets, hunger spreads like a plague. People eat what they can find, but it's never enough. Malnutrition, then starvation, becomes widespread. Disease follows. Without clean water and sanitation, illnesses that were once easily preventable rampage through communities. This is a world unrecognizable. humanity is pushed back centuries into a new dark age. In this Russian roulette game that we've been playing with the sun for so many years, the probability of a catastrophic solar storm hitting the Earth is 12% in 10 years. That is why it is important to prepare contingency plans, as such a disaster could strike at any time. Each household should have an emergency kit that includes water, non-perishable food, a first aid kit, flashlights, extra batteries, and other essentials to last for at least 2 weeks. Investing in alternative power sources such as solar panels with battery storage or portable generators can provide a backup when the grid goes down. Having a supply of stored water and the means to purify water, such as purification tablets or filters, is critical. At the governmental and institutional level, upgrading and reinforcing power grids, communication networks, and transportation systems to withstand electromagnetic disturbances are essential steps. This includes installing grid-strengthening technologies like Faraday cages around critical components, investing in advanced space weather forecasting capabilities and satellites specifically designed to monitor solar activity can provide early warnings, allowing for preventative measures to be enacted in time. Governments should conduct public awareness campaigns about space weather risks and preparedness strategies, ensuring that citizens understand the potential impacts and how to prepare. Collaboration between countries is crucial for sharing data, research, and resources. A global network for space weather forecasting and response can enhance preparedness efforts. Developing policies that require the hardening of critical infrastructure and the stockpiling of essential supplies would ensure that both public and private sectors are better prepared for solar storm events. By implementing these strategies, society can enhance its resilience against the potentially devastating effects of severe solar storms. While it is impossible to prevent such natural phenomena, thorough preparation can significantly mitigate their impact, preserving critical infrastructure and saving lives. The next solar maximum is expected to peak around 2025, which suggests that solar activity, including the frequency of CMEs, will be at its peak in 2024 and 2025. Whether or not a Carrington event will hit us is left purely to chance. For this reason, make sure you're prepared.